Hey, folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Embellish Podcast, a podcast focused on product stories, product storytellers, interesting brand ambassadors, and any other thing that we happen to come up with. Whether you're a geek, a fan, a casual observer of the spirits industry, or someone that's just floating through this channel, I hope you find what we're going to talk about today interesting. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. I can be found on just about any podcasting platform that exists. If you can't find me there, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com. And I'll get that taken care of. I also generally live stream the recording of these episodes whenever we happen to do them. Tonight, it happens to be 6 p.m. Central, and we're talking through and with a pretty interesting guy. We're going to be talking with Michael. Michael, and I already failed completely miserably. Did not ask how to pronounce your last name, so I'm not going to try to slaughter it. I'll give you the chance to tell me however to pronounce your last name. It's not a thing that I know right off the top of my head, but you are from the Drinking and Knowing Things website, book, and just like any other fun thing that a human being can imagine, it sort of feels like you're a part of that. So I'll let you kind of do a little quick intro of who you are.
Awesome. So last name is pronounced Juergens, like the lotion.
Okay.
But it does have an extra vowel in it. So, I get in Southern California where I'm from, I get Wergens because that's the Mexican pronunciation. I also get Jurgens in Europe because that's the European pronunciation. But
that's the route I was going to. I was like, man, this might be really Germanic. I work with some folks in Western Europe, and I'm like, this might be Jurgens, so I'm not gonna try.
Yeah, I've heard it all. I think when the family came over initially, it was J-U with the umlaut, and they said, "Oh, this is too hard for the Americans," so they made it J-U-E, and that made it even worse. So.
Right. Well, I mean, it is too hard for the Americans. You're not wrong there. We need straightforward things. My last name is Hughes, and that's a pretty easy one to come up with. John Hughes. If you've ever watched a movie from the '80s, the name makes sense. Yeah. But we've been called everything from Hughes to Huggies to Hugs. It's just names are not a forte, I guess, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and then of course my pen name, Michael Amen. I use my middle name for all the books that I write. So
you're an author, you're a published author, and I have a friend who's written a book. I've talked with another author on this podcast before, Shelley Sakier, who wrote a whiskey specific book, and it is impressive to ever meet anybody who writes a book, much less multiple books. But whenever I was kind of doing the initial research on you, I came across Michael Amen, and I'm like, who is this person? Is this is it right? Yeah, I didn't even immediately think of a pen name or anything like that. I was like, well, maybe you're helping out or whatever. But then obviously, I kind of got to the end of it like, oh, I got it now. Got it.
Well, here's what happened. When I wrote my very first book years ago, I was like, I should probably just use a pen name so that, like, if people are Googling me for business,
right, you can separate the two identities.
You can separate the two. Not that it was a big deal. I just was trying to make it easier on people. So I'm like, well, I'll just use my middle name, Amen, which a lot of people call me Michael Amen anyways, particularly my mom when I've done something shitty. Michael Amen. So
familiar with that.
So I did that with my first book, and then I was sort of locked in because then I didn't want to start writing books under different names. So I just said, fuck it. I guess we're doing this. And so every book I've put out that's been kind of my own work. I've written a couple technical books too that have gone out to the world as more, Michael Juergens. But any of my personal stuff that I'm writing for my own personal enjoyment goes out as Michael Amen.
Yep. And so the book, I guess we can start there, but the immediate thing, the book is part and parcel to the blog website as well. Is that a correct statement? They're
correct.
They're hand in hand. So you get this name is Drinking and Knowing Things. Are you like a big Game of Thrones fan?
Huge.
Okay. Okay.
Huge.
But I assume like Game of Thrones.
I'm going to be one of those douchey Game of Thrones fans that says, I read the fucking books and the books are way better.
You're not wrong, and so that's immediately what I was getting ready to ask is because the book is always better. There's been a very few times where I've seen a movie and been like, it did it justice or whatever. But I was watching a podcast or an interview or something, and it had George Martin on it. And whenever they were running the television series and they got to the Red Wedding, he was talking about, like everybody, they were filming people's and friends' reactions or whatever. And he was like, and I don't understand why all of these people are reacting to this scene in this television show, because this book was written 10 years ago. Like, this scene was written over 10 years ago. You know what the Red Wedding is. He's like, maybe you remember a time in the mid 90s whenever your, friend who likes to really read books is just real pissy. It's because they read about the Red Wedding. And so the books are fantastic. And I appreciate that.
I actually read the entire series twice before the HBO series. And then I read it again just to kind of bring myself up to speed. I think the fifth one came out right as the series was coming out. So maybe I hadn't read that one, but I had read I read the original ones when they came out. I mean, I remember waiting for the next one to come out. Like, okay, when's it coming out?
That's the worst. That is the absolute worst. Cause I stumbled into it by I saw the first book and I was like, I'm going to read. This is before the television show was going to be an option. Somebody recommended it or whatever. And I read it and I didn't know it was a book series. This has happened like 4 or 5 different times where like the Wheel of Time series or something, like, I don't know that they're a series. And I read the first book. I'm like, this is really good. I wonder if there's going to be another one. And then I find out like only 2 of the 15 books are out. And I have to wait, a year, 2 years, 5 years, or with, George Martin's situation. I don't know. Who knows if we're ever going to get the final book?
They're never coming out. By the way, have you read The Name of the Wind?
Yes. Yes.
Speaking of some fucked up books that have yet to come out yet.
Right. Yes. That's these guys. I don't know what it is. So George Martin is one of the most talented authors ever. And I've told a number of people this when they started watching the television show, like, he's going to write a really good character and then he's going to kill that person in the next 100 pages.
Yeah.
And then he's going to write another character that's slightly worse than the other one. He's going to make you love that person. He's going to kill that till you get to the end. And one of the people that you hated the most in the beginning is now the hero. Like, like we end up with Tyrion Lannister being the primary character.
Yeah.
And you hate him in the first 75 to 100 pages of the first book. Like, it's brilliant. And it also is everything Gen X to me. Like, this is like Generation X. This is perfect for us. It's like, yep, we have to have a hero we hate.
Yep.
So you kind of came off of this, but you wrote this website blog. I hate using the term blog because it almost seems reductive. There's a little more content and context to it but it's turned into this book. And when I first kind of became aware of who you were, I'm gonna go out and buy the book. I need to have the book. I need to look at it, make sure that there's something here. And it's good. It's really good. And it kind of plucked a reminiscent string for me. Like, I'm at a point now in my life where I'm like super into whiskey, but the first time I ever started thinking about food or beverages in a kind of a heightened level was immediately, and I'm going to be one of those people, immediately around Sideways. You remember the movie Sideways? I'm sure you remember the movie Sideways.
Absolutely.
The degree that Paul Giamatti's character talks about his passion for Pinot Noir, I'm like, I need this in my life, right? And so then I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to get into wine, but I showed you where I am in Kentucky. It's not exactly the holy land of wine and whatnot, but it is for bourbon. But I get this book and I read through, the first 20 or so entries, and to me, it is like the best version of a daily affirmation book. It's just like suggesting wines, right? Like, cause that's what daily affirmation, the website series was kind of a daily post on, this one, sort of building your repertoire, but this is so much better than that. So like, where did this ideas come from? Like, how did you get to this?
Well, and I, of course, as a writer, you always love accolades from someone saying, I got your book and it was awesome. But more importantly, I think, I've read, I don't know how many thousands of books in my life, but very, very rarely do I read a book and then take action in my life because of the book. And when I do, that to me is like, that was a fucking worthy investment of a read because I'm doing something different in my life. And I loved before the show, you were talking that you'd already gone out and identified 4 wines that you wanted to try and got them. And so that to you has been one of those books, which is awesome. But here's how all this started. When I first got serious about studying for wine, I went out and I bought every wine book that there was. and I would read them, and they're just very informative and also incredibly boring. You know, the Encyclopedia of Wine, the Wine Bible, you know, wine species, wine and grapes. It's like great reference manuals, but not the kind of thing you just want to jump on and read on an airplane, but also learn some shit.
Right.
And so I was like, why isn't there like even Sideways, right? Which was a novel, and it's a good novel. Even Sideways, it was a little girly. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's a little girly. I'm like, I want to read a wine book with there's guns and scams and schemes, and you know, I want to read
some meat to it. Some meat to it.
Yeah, something that's you know that's like engaging emotionally. And so, but that book didn't exist, so I wrote it. This fiction novel about these basically the secret underground world of high stakes gambling on wine tasting competitions run by the Chinese mafia, and these two dudes that try to scam the system and make off with all the money. It's awesome. So I wrote this book, and everybody loved it. And so they wrote a sequel to that, and I wrote a sequel to that. So there's a trilogy of those books. So that's how this whole thing started. Anyway, my friends then who knew I could write, they were like, why don't you start like a wine newsletter? And I'm like, that's fucking stupid. I'm not doing that. There's so many wine newsletters and they all suck. And I don't want to be another Yahoo, you know, telling you that this wine tasted like persimmons and violet aromas and shit like that you can't pick up, you know? So I'm like, I'm not doing it. So I resisted for years. And then I was on a plane and I was reading another boring wine book. Just, you know, gathering data. And in the book, the author was making fun of Chenin Blanc. And I think the actual sentence is Chenin Blanc is a garbage grape or something like that. And I read that sentence and I was like, fuck you. It is not. Chenin Blanc is awesome. And I don't know how you're a wine expert. You're saying this shit. You are wrong. This needs to be rectified immediately. So I pulled out my laptop on the plane and I wrote this email to my friends saying, hey, everybody, you should go out and drink more Chenin Blanc immediately because it's great. And here's why it's great. And here's some specific bottles that I recommend. And I did it just as a response to this woman who'd written this fucking book that I disagreed with. And so I sent it to my friends and then they all responded and said, this is amazing. Can you send us another one? And I was like, yeah, you know what else I think is cool? Nebbiolo is pretty fucking cool, you know.
And that's one of them that I picked up. That exact the Nebbiolo, and I was going to ask you how to pronounce that.
Nebbiolo, it's awesome. Love it.
So you started this basically as a fuck you to someone else's opinion.
Yeah, and I literally just wrote emails to my friends. But what happened is then those friends would forward those emails, and then those people would. Pretty soon, I'm getting emails from random people in like other countries like Germany or Australia. I don't even know. They're like, hey, my friend forwarded me this. Can you put me on your distribution list? And I'm like, sure, whatever. No problem. And so I did it that way for, I don't know, like probably a year. And then it was getting too big to manage out of my inbox. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to set up a website so people can just go. If they want the damn newsletter, just go put your email address in and you'll just start getting them one at a time from the beginning. But then people were like, oh, I came late to the party and we're on number 42. Can you send me all the back issues? And I'm like, no, I'm not your fucking librarian. I'm sorry you're late to this party, but I don't know you. You live in China. Like, I'm not going to be digging through and sending you an email with 42 attachments because you're late. But I was like, okay, I need some way of doing this. So I'm like, all right, look, I'll badge up the first 52 into a book. And I'll put it out there with the idea that if you truly want to explore, here's a year's worth. You can spend 5 minutes each week reading about a wine. You'll probably laugh. You'll probably cry. You can go try the wine if you want, or if not, if you don't. But at the end of that year, you will know more about wine than pretty much everybody you know in a very non-threatening, sort of fun kind of way. And so that was the whole purpose of it. I was tired of responding to requests for give me all the back issues. And so I put up there and then it became a bestseller. And I was like, shit, all right, thanks for doing this. So then I badged up the next 52 and I put it out there so people could have 2 years. So that's how it all started.
Yeah. So that's man, I'm here for that degree of pettiness. Absolutely connect with that. Like you know what? I think your opinion is stupid, and that's why I'm going to write something to the contrary. I like the daily approach of this, and I made the maybe the same mistake other people might is I get the book and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to sit down and read this like a novel, right? And you can, but it becomes information overload, especially if it's not a category that you're incredibly familiar with to begin with,
Totally.
right? So you're learning, you're trying to learn way too much at one time, and so I backed up. I read through the first 20, found four that I really liked. I made sure I found 10 that I really liked, and then I was like, okay, now let's go find online retailers that have this exact thing that can also ship to Kentucky, because I don't know if you know anything about direct to consumer laws in Kentucky, but they're still a little bit archaic.
Isn't that where
You
the
know,
big legal battle's going on right now? Isn't that where the lawsuit started for
yeah.
wine?
So we actually had a significant one last year
Yeah,
because even within our own state, distillers were having the inability to ship within the state. So like Kentucky's the center of bourbon in the United States largely, and if you distilled in Frankfurt, you could not send it to any other part of the state, and so they actually got that kind of lessened, right? So now they can ship inside the state, but bringing in alcohol from outside places, there's very few locations that you can get from. DC is one of the places that's allowed to ship here because DC is not a state and can do whatever the hell it wants to. And a handful of other places, but it becomes this like, all right, I've got these 10 that I've picked. Let's try to find, 3 or 4 that I can find. And so, I found the 4, I brought them in, and now I can sit down, I can read the review, or not. It's not even a review is the wrong term there, right? Like the educational material that exists for this particular wine. Now I can read it, I can taste it, and then I can kind of come out the other end of it. And one of the things that I appreciate, and is I'm I'm into whiskey, sort of like you're into wine. Not quite though, because you're way like you're getting into the sommelier status, and I'm definitely not that. But it's not written from that perspective, which is a lot of the problem with a lot of things, right? I've got this malt whiskey yearbook sitting on my desk here that is truly for the aficionado, but that's only like 5% of the people out there that are trying to drink whiskey. What is good for me, or at least what I find good about this, is that you're not trying to get into esoteric tasting notes. You're
no,
just trying to say, this is why this would be good. And here's a little bit of information about how it's grown, where it's grown, what the intent of it is, what the region, because you come across a bunch of wines that have, you know, having a Cabernet Sauvignon doesn't mean anything, because it could be a cab from the United States. It could be from somewhere else. And those are all going to have significant variations. And you kind of educate us on that. And that's perfect, but it's not so deep that I'm like, exactly what you're talking about. Like, it's not elder essence or anything like that. It's just like,
right.
this is good. This is a good fucking wine. Drink it.
Yeah, and I think what happens is to your point. Yeah, there's 5% of the population that wants to be that aficionado, wants to go deep, 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 and then there's 95% of people that are like, I'm be, I'm curious about wine, but it seems like too much goddamn work.
Yep.
And so, like, if I'm at a dinner at a restaurant and someone pours me a glass of wine, I'm going to drink it, but I don't want to put the work in. And so I'm like, you don't have to do it this way, and there's no work. It will make it fun. And what's interesting to me is I know of at least 15 clubs around the U.S. where there are people who get together in a city on a periodic basis. Once a week or once a month, and then they go through the wines from the book. I know there's this. There's even a group that does it online down in Auburn, Alabama.
Oh, wow.
They host a thing where they have a bunch of people that do it, but they all go out locally and they get on like Facebook Live, and then they read the chapter and they go through shit together, which I just think is great. Like, people are having fun with it and they're being curious. And I gave the people who were curious but not committed an easy roadmap to follow.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. And, you can, I want to be the aficionado person too, but you can't jump straight to that. I want to know things. Like, I want to be the guy who drinks and knows things as well. But you don't immediately hit that rip and get that far into, down the rabbit hole to the point to where not only are you a wine aficionado, but you're now also, you know, kind of getting certified and saying, you know what, let's start up a completely brand new infant industry in another country around wine. Like that's, you know, you just kind of keep climbing the different levels that exist. But it's, like I said, it's a really good book. Like it's a thing that everyone, if you're even remotely interested in connecting with the beverages you drink at a deeper level, put it on your shelf. Always put it on your shelf.
What's awesome is I very commonly get emails and Instagram messages and stuff from people who maybe are 3 or 4 months into it. Mm-hmm. And it's like the light bulb turns on, and I'll get an email from someone with like a picture of a wine list at a restaurant. They're like, dude, I can do it. I can do wine. And they're like, or like they're in a wine store and they're taking pictures of bottles from, you know, that they recognize, like, oh, here's a Nebbiolo. Like, oh, look, I'm doing it. And or they're sitting there going like, my friends are making me pick the wines at dinner now. Like I'm the guy.
Like, you become that guy really, really quickly. And it, you know, like wine, whiskey, wine and whiskey people specifically, and I don't think it's not really in a ton of other spirits, but man, they could be pretentious as hell. Like they could just be pretentious as hell, and trying to like enter into the market to understand the things, like they're already at, you know, like this level, and they're going to sort of talk down to you. And this approach is similar to what I try to do whenever it comes to whiskey conversations. You know, people call me like, what should I buy? You know, they're in the liquor store. What should I buy today? And I'm like, you know, what's the last 4 things you've had, and how do you connect with that? And don't spend a ton of money. And, you know, like, don't try to pretend like you're tasting marzipan, because if you've never had marzipan in your life, that's not a flavor you can recall. And honestly, like, who the hell is drinking or eating marzipan on a regular basis? Or another one that comes across regularly, I can't think. It's a red berry that's mainly currants. Currants, like fresh currant is not really widespread in the United States. Like that's not a thing. You might have had currant jelly, which is a different flavor, but we get stuck in that. Like the nerds can get stuck in that, and then it makes this huge barrier to entry of people that we just, wine and whiskey, you want to drink and you want to talk to people. Like that's what it is. Like if you're drinking a vodka based drink or rum based drink or tequila based drink, you're usually just, you know, at a club, at a bar, not necessarily interested in a conversation. But wine, whiskey, coffee, these things lend themselves to humanity, right? And that's what makes them interesting. But the people who hold all the knowledge tend to be pretentious. This is not that.
It isn't, but I would say that, like, my theory on that is that wine is pretentious in the U.S., but when you get outside the U.S., it's not. I mean, like you go to Spain or Italy or Greece, there's just wine's just part of the culture. I remember one time I was driving through northern Italy, and I stopped at a gas station to get some water. And I walked in the door, and I was a little hungover, I'll be honest. It was early in the morning. I walked in the door, I'm getting some water, and I look over, and I'm in a fucking gas station in rural Italy. And in the corner of the gas station, there's these 2 big copper tanks with valves on them. And it says wine, €1.95 per liter. And there's a dude sitting on the fucking floor with a 5-gallon jerry can, top off the jerry can, filling it up out of this tank. And I like walk in and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm trying to process it, and I get my water and I go to pay for it, and it's €4. And so I'm like, the water is twice as much as
the wine is cheaper than the wine. Absolutely.
And I sort of walk out the door, and I got in the car, and I'm telling the guys I'm with this story, and so they're like, well, how was the wine?
Right. You didn't buy the wine?
And I go, fuck, I didn't buy that. And I this is like I don't have very many regrets in my life.
Right.
Like, not trying the €1.95 gas station wine out of the fucking jug. But that's how it is. And no one, like, if you did that, if you walked into a dirty Shell gas station and there was a jar of wine and some dude was sitting on the floor filling up a jelly jar out of it, you'd be like, that guy, oh. But over there, it's not a big deal. And I kind of understand why, though, because the rest of the, you know, particularly in Europe, they've been doing wine for 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years. It's just not a big thing. Right. And for us, we only really started 50 years ago. You know, Mondavi basically came out and told the world, we can be good at wine too. And everyone else is like, no, you can't. He's like, well, I'm going to show you. And
Right.
so in order to get there, we had to really take it seriously. And now we're paying the price for that because we've made it this inaccessible thing for so many people, which fucking sucks. Like wine is fun. Wine brings people together. You can have a blast with wine. And people don't. And they don't even explore it because they think it's too douchey or too much work or whatever. And that shuts them out of having these amazing experiences with their friends and drinking cool shit.
Yeah. And it feels like, at least in spirits, people are cautious to take risks on buying something. And this is the other author that I had on. We were talking about scotch, and I don't know a ton about scotch. Don't know anything about it. I said, like the first time that I walked into a store to try to buy some scotch, I felt an awful lot like the first time that I went to the pharmacy and needed to pick up tampons for my wife. Like, I don't know what to buy here. Like, I have no context of what is good, what is appropriate, what's a decent price. And it's like, I need someone to tell me what that is. But because of the way Western culture has adopted wine and alcohol largely, I mean, specifically, think about where I am in the world, right? Like, we're in the buckle of the Bible Belt. Like, we're still in Prohibition era. Like, the county that I live in was still a dry county, which I don't know if you even know what that is, but some people do. Until about 15 years ago. 15 years ago, wow. This place was completely dry. And so there's a stigma that's involved with it. And then there's this potential pretentious air that comes around because of the way it's been portrayed, maybe in media, but you're right. Like it doesn't have to be a transcendent, transformative experience drinking a glass of wine. Sometimes this is good. I like the people that I'm with, and we're going to have a good time. Like, it can be there.
I would say we talk about these things called epiphany wines, and the epiphany wine is where you drink it and the moment sort of embeds itself in your head for forever.
Yep.
You remember the people you were with, you remember the exact wine you were drinking, you remember the glass you were drinking it out of, you remember what you were eating, you remember the fucking waiter's name. If you're like, it's just solidified. And it's so awesome when it happens, but it doesn't happen often. But if you talk to anyone who's a really wine geek, they can tell you it was this wine, it was that wine. They have 4 or 5 or whatever. And I would say in my lifetime, I've had a number of those, and a lot of times I wasn't drinking a $500 bottle of wine. I was drinking a $20 bottle of wine.
And I think that lends to it for me, because maybe you didn't have that expectation. You know, I've tried some expensive things in my life, and I've always felt like, or most of the time I felt like the value and the taste matched. Right.
Yeah.
But it's hard to have that kind of epiphany nature when you spent $200 on a bottle of wine and it tasted like $200 bottle of wine. Like, it met your expectation. It's when you taste the $20 bottle of wine and you're like, what was that?
Yeah.
Like, that's where it comes from.
Holy shit. Well, I'll tell you this. Here's a story about an epiphany wine. So I was in a group of us had gone to France to run a wine marathon. And at the end of the trip, we ended up in Paris. And we just happened to be there on my birthday. And so one of the girls in our group had, as a surprise, gotten us into Guy Savoy, which is one of the highest rated restaurants in the world. And so my girlfriend she wasn't on the trip, but she sent a bottle of Sauterne to the hotel from my birth year. So it was an expensive bottle of wine. Mm-hmm. With the thought that we would bring it to the restaurant and drink it and celebrate it. And so we called the restaurant to confirm that was cool. And they're like, no, that's not fucking cool. And so we're like, okay. So we go to the dinner. We have a great dinner. Mm-hmm. And then the next day we're all leaving. And I got this bottle of 1970 Sauterne. Like, we can't just fucking, like I'm not going to take it on the plane with me. Like, right. What are we going to do? So we went out and it's the morning. And we went out and we found a donut store. We bought donuts and we got plastic cups, and we went to Montmartre, and there was a park bench, and we sat on this park bench drinking Sauterne and eating donuts at like 10 o'clock in the morning. Anyways, the point of all this was we thought it was awesome. My son was with us, and he was, I don't know, 17 at the time, maybe, and not a wine guy at all. And so he has this experience, and I don't, we all get on planes and we leave. A couple of years later, my son graduates from high school, maybe it was the year after he graduated. Anyways, he him and his friends decide they're going to take a trip to Europe. So he goes to Europe with two of his friends for like a month, and they tool around. I get a photo from him that is a photo of the fucking park bench. He texts it to me. He goes, guess where I am? And I'm like, holy shit. That meant enough. That experience meant enough to you that you dragged your friends to go take a photo of a fucking park bench in Paris. That's the kind of shit that I'm talking about. Those types of
yeah, it's an imprinted memory. It's a thing that you're going to connect with forever. And it may not be for me, but it could be somebody in the group that I'm with, right? And that's what social spirits are about. That's what it feels like social spirits are about, at least for me. So you mentioned running in there. Like you just kind of casually did you're an adventure runner? Like, is this a thing? Like, this is a thing you do?
This is the thing I do. That is correct. My goal. So I started running marathons when I was about 22. And I, did the normal thing, like, oh, let's go sign up for the LA Marathon again. Let's go run it again. And that's great. And you get a lot of joy out of that. And then I ended up doing a marathon down deep in the heart of Antarctica near the South Pole on a glacier, and I almost died. And I came out of that experience saying, like, it was 100 times more profound than running the LA Marathon again. And so at that point in time, I was like, oh shit, I'm doing this wrong. I need to seek out weirder, harder, more bizarre races that will be more like epiphany races than just running around another city. And so I started like searching for weird shit and then started doing it.
So I mean, I don't understand the degree of self-hatred you have to just, run that much, but I have some coworkers that absolutely do. One of the ladies I work with, she's into the, 100-mile enduro trail races where you lose all your toenails and do those types of things. And about a year and a half ago, I got a call from a coworker. I was like, hey, I don't know if you know anything about Ragnar races, and they're not quite that bad, but it's like a team relay event, and it's 36 hours. And she calls and she says, hey, we're doing this Ragnar race in Kentucky. It's the Bourbon Chase is what it's called, and she's like, we're going to run a couple 100 miles in 36 hours, and I'm putting a team together to run. And I was like, I think you've called the wrong person, because I'm not that. And she's like, no. We need a van driver, because they run relays. And so you got to be the person to drop off at the next thing. And I'm like, this is a thing I can do for you. Like, I can be the guy that stays up for 36 hours and just drives to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I don't know what it is, but you running people are some of the happiest people when you are self-abusing. And I don't understand it. Like, you've slept for 45 minutes and 36 hours, and you've run a total of 36, 40, 42 miles. It's been a torrential downpour. It was 96 degrees when we started, and it was damn near freezing when we finished because a storm rolled through. You almost got hit by a car. You run up a mountain, you run down a mountain, but everyone is smiling and happy. And I'm like, I enjoyed every minute of it, but what is wrong with you?
It is funny. I think the thing about running is, remember when you were a kid and then recess would happen and you'd jump up and you'd run outside and you just fucking run in circles and you put your hands out like you were an airplane and shit like that until it became not cool anymore, right? And then you stop. Right. But I think that the human body, the human mind, more so, the human body's engineered to run, and the human mind is connected to it because that's how we survived for 50,000 years. You'd throw a stick at an animal and wound it, and then you'd run after it for 3 days until it finally lost enough blood that it would just give up, and then you'd have shit to eat. So it meant this thing to us, and that switch is in our brains, just waiting to be flipped on. And if you accidentally flipped it on, like I did, I accidentally flipped mine on, and I was like, this is fucking cool. I should do more of this. And that's, I think, kind of what happens. You find out who you are, and you connect to all these primal things that our body's supposed to do. And it just makes you fucking feel good. By the way, I will tell you, the process of running, I don't fucking like. I'm the guy that's sitting out there every time going, why am I doing this? this fucking sucks. It's hot. My feet hurt. Like, this is bullshit. I literally went for a run the other morning, just a little 4-mile run. And I was like, not even halfway through it. And I'm like, I want this thing to be over. Like and if you talk to runners, they'll all tell you, no one says like, oh, I love,
but they remember it with fondness. They remember it with this just unabashed fondness. Like that's because they had a good time. They cheered each other on, but at the end of the race, everybody was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this again next year. I'm exhausted. This was, whatever. And 2 weeks later, they're all like, that was a blast.
The next one.
Let's go. We're ready. Like, they were going to do one out in San Diego and it ended up having to get pushed or whatever. And so they're going to do it again this fall. They're like, yeah, we're running it again. And I'm like, and there's something about that, the farther you get distance wise from the suck, the more fun you can remember it as. But it's the other part, I think maybe the part that is not as fun for me, because I've done some running, I was an active tennis player, and part of that was, I have to condition. And so I have to make sure that I'm running in the off season, whatever. But there's this solitary nature that can occur whenever you're out there running. And maybe I've got this narrative wrong, but you found yourself in a similar position, running in a foreign country. And while you're in this like sort of shitty solitary nature of just running and hating it, like you developed a thought that like, why doesn't this country have its own wine industry? Like that's where your brain is. Some other people are just like, can I make it the next mile? Can I make it the next 2 miles or whatever? But like your brain is thinking of budding an infant industry. This is Bhutan. Is that how it is?
Bhutan.
Bhutan wine. This thing that didn't exist. You're like, it should. Like this came out of a running brain. Is that correct?
That's exactly what happened. Yep. So,
but then you have the audacity to like, okay, now let's make it a thing. Like there's a lot of ideas. I've had a lot of ideas, but like, okay, let's make it an industry. And then you did. And so I want to hear about the Bhutan wine.
Okay. Well, so let's start with where Bhutan is, which Bhutan's in the Himalayas. It's between Tibet and Nepal. It's about the same size. I didn't know this, by the way, but my girlfriend had read a book about a woman who moved to Bhutan and fell in love. She read it in high school. So the whole time we had been together, she kept saying, I want to go to Bhutan. So I'm searching the internet. I'm on all these email lists, and I get a spam email that says Bhutan Marathon. And I go, oh, that's that place that my girlfriend's talking about. Mm-hmm. So I click on it, and they're like, we're organizing a group to go run the first international marathon in Bhutan. If you want to go, click this thing. I'm like, fucking, I'm in. Sounds great. So I click it, I do the thing, I get accepted. I go to my girlfriend, I go, baby, guess what? I'm taking you to Bhutan. Surprise. And she's like, amazing. We're going to the Himalayas. And I go, no, we're not. Bhutan's an island in Indonesia. And she goes, no, it isn't. It's in the fucking Himalayas. I didn't even know where it was. And so I go, wait, I just signed this up to run a marathon in the fucking Himalayas. Are you kidding me? And she goes, yeah, let's go. And so I go, oh, all right, I guess we're doing this.
Right.
And so I went there, and a couple of things happened. So the first thing that happened is, so Bhutan is like the only carbon negative country on the planet. And they're trying to become the first 100% organic country of the planet. They grow really great crops, which is odd because you don't really think of the Himalayas as a place to grow things. But they grow the world's best red rice and the world's best mandarin oranges and the world's best cardamom and the world's best, like everything I ate when I was there was fucking awesome. And so I just assumed where plants grow, there's grapes. It's like that everywhere in the world, everywhere.
Right.
And so I just assumed it. And so I just was on the lookout. I was like, hey, where's the wineries? Where's the wineries? I want to visit a winery, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's like, you don't know what you're talking about. So we go to run the race. And the first part of the race, like you're up in this national park and you kind of run down. It's just fucking awesome. You run down these, by this like rushing whitewater rapids on one side and the national park on the other. It's beautiful. And then you come out the second half, you start to run through like this rural agriculture area. And it's all these terraced slopes. And I'm running through these and I'm looking at them. I'm going, where are the fucking grapes?
Yeah, this is wine country. This is wine country. If
this
you've ever
is
seen
wine
it.
country. Yeah, where are they? I got to find them. And so randomly, after the race, we had dinner with some of the government officials who wanted to meet the crazy foreigners who came to the country to. And so I end up asking one of them, hey, where are the wineries? I'm not leaving until I get to try your Bhutanese wine. And they go, we don't have any. And I go, what the fuck are you talking about? How could you? This is what you don't have any? Why not? And he goes, we don't have any grapes. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, like, grapes have never grown here before. We don't have them. And I'm like, oh shit, we need to fucking solve for this right now. And so, and I had never anticipated that I was going to be the guy that did it. I just thought it would be cool if they did it. So I worked with the government for a couple of years, like kind of showing them how to do it and building out a business plan and coming up with the wine rules and everything. Just literally, like, I thought it would be awesome if they did it. And then they're like, we're moving forward with this. We're going to need a partner to help us. And I'm like, yeah, you should probably get someone who knows what the fuck they're talking about. Like, yeah, that's going to be.
You're the guy. You're the guy.
Like, wait, I get to do it? I get to be the guy that invents a wine industry for a country. I get to fucking figure it all out. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm so all in on this. This is awesome. So yeah, so now we have 6 vineyards in their 5th growing season. I have 2 vineyards in my third growing system. And I actually just agreed to a lease on another vineyard yesterday. So
is the goal for this to be an export for them, or is this just something for them to have as a part of
the goal? To be an export for sure. Well, like our plan is we want to scale to about 2,000 acres, which by frame of reference, like Napa is like 40,000. So, it's, 1/20 the size of Napa over the next 10 years. I actually think this is like a 100-year project to build the next Napa Valley, but I'll be fucking dead.
Right. Well, I mean, in given the remote nature of where you're at, that probably creates that need for it to be like a 100-year situation, because you're in a carbon neutral place, which means there's not going to be what I would imagine. I mean, this is all me guessing, but I would imagine there's not a significant infrastructure in place that allows vehicles to move around, or that carbon negative becomes a carbon neutral, or whatever else.
Yeah, there's some practical considerations to building a wine industry in the Himalayas that I failed to consider in the depths of my passion for thinking about why to do this. But
it's, I've talked to a number of different people who've started off, on audacious projects. I was talking to a distiller in Michigan, and he is trying to recapture or regrow a specific type of rye that was grown in the United States pre-prohibition. And so when he started off, he found the rye that he wants. He was able to get it from Russia because they still had this particular type of rye that was brought over here to begin with. And then he convinced the national park system to let him start growing it on an island that is a national park in Michigan. Like they just like, yeah, you can, but he doesn't have the means to get a car there or a tractor or anything. So he has to buy like World War II landing ships to haul the equipment over, to do the farming, and then bring the equipment back. But if you start thinking about how hard it's going to be from the onset, you might not ever do it.
You won't do it.
Right. Yeah. So you gotta, take on the true agile mindset and just go see what you can kind of create or build or whatever.
And for me, like, just being as passionate as I am about wine, for me, I think the best wine is wine that expresses a sense of place. Like, anybody can make like a recipe wine that says it's 14% alcohol and it's 40% oak and it's 10 grams of sugar, and we're going to add shit to it to make it a uniform color. Like, anyone can do that. It's not fucking interesting.
Right.
What's interesting is where you drink a wine and it is different, and it sort of speaks to you about where it came from. And, it's from Sicily. And so you get some smoke because there's volcanic soil, and you get some acid because the cooling ocean breezes, and you get really bright fruit because it's fucking sunny as hell in Sicily. Like, okay, I kind of get a sense of that. And so for me, Bhutan, if you go there, like, it's a bucket list destination travel spot for many.
Yeah, it is for me now too. It's obviously, it's likely a place that I won't ever go to, but it's on my bucket list, and I didn't even know it needed to be there until I found out who you were. And so thanks for that. Like my potential future bank account is really excited about the need for me to go to this particular location. But the scenery is majestic. It's all the things you want, but you're right. Like, anybody can anybody can create a wine, and it can be an awful lot like McDonald's, where they all taste the exact same. Cracker Barrel, any one of those chain restaurants, it all tastes the same everywhere. There's a reason why people are seeking out locally sourced ingredients in restaurants and for wineries and for whiskey and for anything. Like, what makes you unique? What is your flavor of your country? And that's, you get to create that. Like, they don't have that. Like, that's not a thing that exists.
They don't have that. And Bhutan is such a magical place. I mean, people that go there, they literally will tell you it was life-changing experience. It already has that this profound uniqueness to, I mean, the fucking country doesn't measure gross domestic product. They measure gross national happiness. I mean, and you feel it when you're there. Like, people are like, we just want to be happy. Let's just be chill and be happy. Like, it's that sort of thing. And so for me, knowing all of the hurdles, I might still have done it, just because I think if you could capture what Bhutan was in a bottle and send it to the rest of the world, I don't know what it's gonna taste like. Right. And frankly, at some level, I don't have any expectations about it. It has to taste like black currant or whatever the fuck, or marzipan. Yeah. You know, what I want it to taste like is Bhutan. And in order to do that, I think people around the world would be like, wow, this is amazing. It may not be the best wine that they've ever tasted. It may not have the same flavors as maybe I don't know, right? Nobody knows, but it will be uniquely Bhutanese. And I think that, to me, is more maybe even the cooler part than inventing the industry. Because I could go to fucking Guam and build some greenhouses and get some oak barrels and you know, make a recipe wine, and great, now Guam has wine. But that's not what I'm trying to do.
Right, but there's a story that's here, and that's the only reason that I ever started this podcast, is because stories are sticky, right? Like, you can create anything, but whenever we start talking about like relating to products, relating to things, relating to brands, if you've got a truthful and well thought out story, people connect with it. And that's exactly what you're building out, the idea of, you know, more countries should measure their success in gross national happiness, because GDP doesn't really get us a ton of happy places. I mean, money is essential for some things, but happiness is not one of those things.
And I think the goal, all of our goals in life, should be to have a happy life. And if that also means being rich, well, cool, go do that. But if it means helping people, or if it means being a scuba diver instructor in Belize, or if it means being a bartender in New York and just banging tourists till you're 65 years old, you know, whatever that is, right? Like, that's maybe how you should live. But
it can be a definition, but it doesn't have to be a definition.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I think, yeah, we're at the same place there. So how long before we see some Bhutan wine?
Well, that's a good fucking question. We were planning to do our first harvest this year. And in the world of grapes, the way that you prune the vines the previous year dictates how much fruit you get the next year. Last year, Bhutan was on lockdown because of COVID.
Right.
And so the people there have never grown grapes before. They're ridiculously skilled agronomists. They grow amazing stuff. They know how to grow shit, but they don't know how to grow wine grapes. And so we were trying to show them how to prune and stuff over like WhatsApp and fucking videos. Yeah. The bottom line is we failed. And so I finally got a full-time viticulturalist in as lockdown ended into the country in around April. And we had to go through and basically re-prune all the vineyards. So we didn't end up getting the level of fruit this year that we had hoped for. So we'll make the first vintage next year. And which is kind of cool. Like, if you think about, imagine having the first bottle of bourbon ever made in the United States.
You know, it's exactly. You're on the precipice of something that's interesting. And I completely get this, trying to teach how to farm grapes to people who don't know what it is over the phone. I work in ag technology, and we're working with North American farmers. but it's the same as trying to get them to understand technology a lot of the times. Like, they know how to farm, they know how to be agronomists, they know how to do all of the stuff, but now it's like, all right, now let's talk about technology. Like, let's build something brand new. And it's incredibly complicated. But selfishly, I'm asking because I'm like, hey, I got to keep my eye open because I don't know how well known it is, but I'm looking for a bottle as soon as it's available.
Well, so I mean, the plan. This is my plan. Mm-hmm. My plan is next year we do the first harvest. There's actually a documentary film crew that's making a feature-length documentary about it. Just because the last time this was done was in New Zealand in like the 1800s. Like, right. And there's probably not too many other countries left that can grow wine that don't. Right. So I'm going to make the first barrel ever. And so that'll be 300 bottles, and I'm going to bottle those up. And those are probably going to be given out to the country and to the museums and the investors in the winery, and maybe a few special other people. And then the rest of the harvest for that season will just be in special bottles of like first harvest ever. Not as cool as first barrel, but first harvest. Right. And we'll make those available. And if you want one, I'll get you one.
Yes, absolutely. So barrels, that just brought up a question that I hadn't thought of until this moment. What are you going to do for barrels? Is there a tree that grows regionally in Bhutan that would make good barrels, or are you bringing wine barrels in? You do, American oak, English oak.
John, how geeky of an answer do you want for this question? Can we go geeky on it?
So you can go as geeky as you want, because right now I'm working on trying to get a cooperage on, so I can talk about like my in-laws are woodworkers, and I come from a long line of home builders, and so I want to talk about that.
Okay,
go as geeky as you want.
Cool. So in the wine world, you're going to use oak for the most part. There are a couple places in Italy that use cherry and chestnut for specific reasons, but for the most part, cherry and chestnut suck. You're going to use oak, and you're only going to use certain species of oak, primarily French oak, Slovenian oak, to a certain extent, and American oak. The issue with oak is, as you are aware, the growth rate impacts how big the rings are. And the closer the rings are together, the more fine-grained the oak is, the less oxygen gets in, the less porous it is, the less oak transfers to the glass. American oak tends to be grown in warmer climates, so it's broader rings, it's more porous. You get more tannin transference from the oak to the wine, and also with American oak, you get kind of a dill quality in wine. I don't know if it's the same in bourbon, probably not.
It can be. I mean, it just depends. It has a lot more to do with the mash bill that comes into play, because if you look at high rye or rye whiskey specifically, you'll end up with that dill, and it has a lot to do with the oak, and it has a lot more to do with the fact that most of the oak that's being used now is new growth. If we go back 50 years, they're cutting old growth, which has denser ring patterns, denser wood. Even American oak was behaving differently, and so when you're trying to
climate change, it's warming up a little bit.
Just because they were grown in the wild, right? And so they actually had to stand up against winds and whatnot. When you actually farm oak, right? They're going to be in rows, they're going to be in columns, and the tree on the outside will be the strongest, but the tree on the inside won't, because there's a windbreak that exists, and it's just a part of the farming ecosystem that exists in North America, and how you would farm trees. We don't get the same quality, because we're also getting taller and more appropriately sized trees faster, but the ring spacing is farther out because it's growing faster, because we're giving it all the things it needs, where it's not having to fight for sunlight or for water with all the other plants. Like older trees, we're different, and that's okay. But that lends to some of these problems, exactly what you're talking about. That don't exist.
I guess it depends. Like if you are looking for barrels that have a much wider, coarser, grain and provide a lot more tannin transference, a lot more oxygenation, fucking great. But if you're looking for something that's more mellow, then that's a problem, right?
Yeah, well, and all the whiskey geeks are they're chasing a ghost of the past, right? I want my whiskey. Like the biggest thing you could do is, can you find a dusty whiskey, a Jim Beam that was made in 1975, so you know it's older. It's going to be older whiskey. It's going to be older wood that's used in it. It's going to be potentially heritage grains. Like that's what everybody's after, and we're never going to be able to recreate that because of modernization of agriculture, because of barrels, because of yeast strains. Like it's just not a thing, but that's what people want. Like they want to be able to have less of the tannic transfer and more of the vanillins and whatnot that come out of the barrel itself.
Yeah. So for wine, essentially the holy grail is French oak, and it's French oak barrels that come from specifically 5 forests in France. And those forests are pretty heavily regulated by the government. They can cut down a certain amount of trees every year, and they've got to plant more ones. And to put it into context, a French oak barrel is $1,500, an American oak barrel is $500, roughly speaking. So, you're talking about 300 bottles. So if you want to spend extra for a French oak barrel, it's costing you $3.30 per bottle of wine cost. So by the time that wine gets to market, and it goes through the distributor and retail channels, it's $20 more expensive to the retail consumer if you're going to go that route. So, but it makes a more refined style of wine. Anyway, back to your whole point. Bhutan has a fuckload of oak.
Nice.
And I will show you. I had to step away from my desk here.
Oh, that's good.
Literally sitting here in my office, I have a ton of different samples of different species of Bhutanese oak trees right here that we think it would make it even more uniquely Bhutanese. Oh, and by the way, Bhutan gets a little cool. So it's not going to grow fast. The rings are pretty fucking tight.
Right.
But there's a bunch of different species. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to do some testing on different Bhutanese oak strains to determine
is there one that is suitable.
Is there one that's suitable? And I am hopeful that there is, but frankly, to be honest, I have my head consumed right now with dealing with the bird problem and the monkey problem and the fucking beetle problem and the lack of rain and one. Like I'm more worried about grapes right now, but my longer term strategy is to find the one that does work, and build a cooperage around that. And inevitably, my 100-year plan, 100 years from now, that Bhutanese wine is going to be aged in Bhutanese oak barrels. And by the way, how fucking cool would it be if you could get like a Lagavulin and aged in a Bhutanese oak barrel? Or
look, hey, I'm telling you right now, there's already going to be people looking for these barrels, because you're talking about French oak, and that is hitting, has been more recently hitting the bourbon industry in the last 5-7 years.
Oh, it has.
French oak is, so it started with Maker's Mark. They're doing their Maker's 46. I don't know if you've seen it out on shelves. That is aged a secondary round with a French oak stave, and so they're dropping French oak into.
Oh, but they're doing staves, not barrels.
Right, they're doing staves, but
they're trying to pick up vanillins more than tannins.
Now everyone else is seeking out, can I get French oak barrels? And so you've got other people that are picking up second use French oak barrels, or maybe first use French oak barrels, to be able to age their bourbon in. And so then when they started doing that, then people are like, well, what else can I get? And so now there's Amburana, and there is the Mizunara from Japan. Like they want all of them. So as soon as you say, oh, we've got Bhutanese oak, some distillery showing up and saying, can I get one of those barrels? And specifically wine finished even. Like you won't have a problem selling that barrel a second round, but you've got to take some folks over to train them on how to make it.
Add value to it, right? So you can buy a new Bhutanese oak barrel for $1,000, but if you want one that's one year finished, it's $2,000.
And this is the thing that is, I think, probably the most brilliant about wine finishing, is that a winery has taken something that before they had to try to sell to someone as a planter. Once it was used up, they're like, well, we're done. I'm going to make it as a landscaping planter in my yard, or I'm going to take the staves and make something. Now, whiskey makers are fighting over them being able to get it. It's brilliant. It's brilliant marketing.
Now the business model shifts. Like we don't even have to sell our wine. We just have to use up the barrels and then sell them to the whiskey guys. And
listen, you're not wrong. There is, I was talking to a brand that is based in New Jersey. It's called Penelope. They do a rosé cask finished bourbon, and they're starting up a rosé company just so they have enough casks to finish in, because there's not enough rosé casks out there for them.
Well, because most rosé is not aged in cask to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah, and so they're like, well, we can make the wine, and they really don't care if they make a ton off the wine, because they really need the barrels. Is what they're really, really after. And so it's just vertical integration. Like, it's really, really smart. And Scotch has been doing that for a while too. They'll invest in sherry and pour the sherry out on the ground just so they have a sherry barrel to age their Scotch in. So yeah, you won't have a problem selling a Bhutanese wine, even if it's not the Bhutanese oak. You'll still be able to sell that. Somebody's going to be after it. But as soon as you get that story through and through.
So that's been part of the grand vision all along. I think the challenge so Bhutan has this really interesting thing. As part of their constitution, they wrote it in that it can never be less than, I think, 68% forests.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it's
Brilliant.
like 73%. So they have, I mean, fucking trees everywhere. The challenge is they have a bunch of different species. I mean, there's species sprawl. So step one is we got to figure out which ones might work. And then as you know, probably if you guys are leaning in on this, you got to age the wood for at least, you got to weather it for at least probably 3 years outside before you can even build a barrel.
Yeah,
so
it depends on climate. Like, if you're aging in Tennessee, you can get away with probably 18 months. But the further north you go, the cooler the climate gets, the less, the more time it's got to sit to be able to kind of do that air curing. And there's a stave mill that's down the road from my in-laws' house, and kind of seeing how they operate. Even in Tennessee, they'll still have to stick sprinklers on it and re-wet the wood, because if it dries too fast, it'll crack.
It'll crack.
It's called checking on the ends is what it'll do. And then it's just not useful as a stave anymore. And so, yeah, like, you've got to identify the species. You've got to create the milling situation to be able to get it down to a stave. Then you've got to train somebody on how to be a cooper. Like, this is a multi-year process, but it is.
So awesome. I would guess my goal right now is to try to just get to the stage where we're making wine. I'm 7 years deep into this thing probably, and I need to make a bottle of wine and understand where we're at, and which will happen next year. But I would guess probably in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to start leaning in on the cooperage situation, which means in probably 6 to 7 years, we'll start having barrels. And my guess is we're going to fuck up initially. And so it'll probably be 10 years before we start having good barrels. And, but my vision would be 100 years from now, like, Bhutanese oak barrels are relevant globally as our French oak barrels.
Yeah, you better not talk too loud, because as soon as you do, then your folks like Kelvin Cooperage and ISC and all these other places, they're going to start paying attention to Bhutan. They're going to be like, hey, what's going on over here? There's a new species of oak, and they want to kind of become a player. So maybe, I guess, you're already friends with the government. So
good fucking luck. Like, Bhutan's not the sort of place you just stroll in and fire up some legal Zoom paperwork and start a company.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the upside is, if they're measuring themselves off of gross national happiness instead of GDP, they're going to be more protective of, this is not about money. This is about.
Well, what's funny is like, I think if I had come to them initially and said, I want to build a wine industry to line my own coffers, my own pockets,
they'd have been like, see you later, man.
They would be like, yeah, go fuck yourself. But I never, like, I truly, and I still to this day, I truly believe, like, this country has the potential to express itself in wine in a way that makes people pay attention around the world. And we should do it just solely for that. I literally, the first years we were talking about this, I had never envisioned myself being involved in any way. Mm-hmm. I was just like, guys, you
have an idea and hand it to somebody. You just want to see what happens. Yeah, absolutely.
But if I had strolled in the door and said, hey guys, I got this idea. I'm going to cut down a bunch of your fucking trees and make some barrels instead of.
We're going to make some money, guys.
And they're going to be money.
Like, yeah, we're good.
Well, it's funny. So the gross national happiness model, it's a little bit complicated. I think there's 4 pillars, and then there's like 7 principles or something like that. But when you look at the process of making wine, like, we mapped it back to the pillars, and it maps back to almost all of them. It's like,
Right.
we want to be socially conscious. We want to be community driven. We want to be, environmentally sustainable. We want to be like, okay, like wine does all this. So yeah, it was, if one of the big guys wants to get in this game and go talk to the Boonies, it'd be my guest, man. But take some counsel and coaching. You may want to approach it with a little bit more
caution
a little more just
delicacy.
understanding of the culture than just, hey, look, I got a way we can make $1 million.
The Western attitude is not going to connect there, is what you're maybe saying there.
They want to evolve as a society, and they recognize that their success as a country is not remaining mired in the past, but they're like, we don't know that it does our citizens any good. It doesn't make them any happier if there's a Starbucks on every corner.
I don't know that it makes any. Does it make anybody happy that there's a Starbucks on every corner besides the shareholders?
When I'm dying for coffee, which I am often,
right?
And I'm not a fan of Starbucks coffee, but you know what? It's there.
I'll take it over like a McDonald's coffee or
a gas station coffee.
I don't know, but there's been some times when that 12-hour old jet gas station coffee was exactly what I needed to not fall asleep behind the wheel of a car. So sometimes that's what connects,
Oh,
but, yeah.
Like I've had more than my fair share of the 24 hour. Like you roll into the AM PM and they have the coffee thing that's like the size of a big gulp, and you're like, I'm doing that, and it's dinner, and you're like, yep.
But and they're like, hey, that coffee's been there for a long time, and I'm like, even better. That means it may have just kind of reduced down even more to where I get to almost a black tar consistency. Something that is dark, bitter, and hateful, sort of like my soul. This is the coffee that I need to keep me awake.
If you're not chewing it, it ain't coffee.
It's that scene. I don't know if you've seen the movie Hidalgo, but he's talking about Turkey. The Viggo Mortensen's character is talking to I think it's a Turkish sultan or something, and he says, we know our coffee's good whenever you put a horseshoe in it, it stands up straight. Right. That's when they know their coffee's good. I'm like, that's exactly what it's supposed to be. So we're still.
I've not seen that movie. Actually, I love Viggo Mortensen. That's the horse movie. He's like a horse racer guy.
Yeah, he's a horse racer from the United States, and there's this endurance horse race that occurs, and I don't remember what country it was in, but one of the people that was that had a horse in the race as well was a Turkish guy, and he was making Turkish coffee specifically, and they were kind of talking about the difference between because this is set in pseudo Western times. It's like, oh, this is the difference between cowboy coffee and Turkish coffee. Like that's what they were kind of going after.
Is it a good movie? Should I watch it?
It's a good movie, especially if you're if you're a horse person, which I mean, you're into you're into endurance racing or endurance type running. You're into hot rods. You're into thrills. So yeah, probably.
But you got to remember, I'm a skate punk from Southern California who grew up at the beach. Like. I've seen a horse, like at the local zoo. But
gotcha.
But I didn't.
Climbing on one is not a thrill that you've chased down yet.
Well, so actually, it's funny. I was doing this thing with my kids when they were growing up. We would call it Adventure Week.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was rules. The rules for Adventure Week is every day you had to do something that you have never done before. And it had to be something that also was kind of a little bit scary. And you could never do the same thing twice. And so we would map it out in advance. And so one year we were mapping out our Adventure Week and we're brainstorming ideas. And one of my kids was like, we should go horseback riding. And I go, all right, let's put that on the list. And it made the list for that year. And so one year we went out and we rented horses, and we did like the most benign trail ride through like this sort of thing, and so I have ridden a horse is the bottom line. I mean, I'm no fucking rookie. Like I did that one thing in Adventure Week with my kids.
You're ready to go, right? No, I'm with you. I'm in the same place. I've grown up around them, but I don't know what my wife was. Like I'm on the equestrian team in college. Those kind of people.
Oh,
so she's a skilled horse person. I don't know what the term is. Horsewoman. Whatever. I am absolutely not. But I don't know. They're scary. So you said a word in there. You said you grew up punk rock, right? So you're in a band?
Yeah.
So so the band is Incandescibles. Is this correct?
Yeah. So I've been playing in punk bands for many years. So the current band that I play in is Incandescibles. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I mean, I went out and I think I found the right one. Is there a female vocalist for this band?
Yeah.
Enjoyed the shit out of it. Just enjoyed the shit out of it. I love. Um, I get into phases when it comes to music where like I'm listening to one genre and that one genre almost explicitly for like 3 months, and then I'll move to another one where so maybe it's hip hop, maybe it's Americana, maybe it's classic rock, maybe it's punk rock, maybe it's whatever. You never know what it's going to be. But about a year and a half ago, I got back into that. For like 6 straight months, it was just like punk rock music, and it was mainly because of a group called the Idols, which you may or may not know. They put out an album, and I'm like, I forgot all about loving punk rock music until that moment. Right? And I listened to it, and it was.
And the fucking Idols. By the way, I not only do I know the Idols, I've seen the Idols live.
So they're coming close by here in September, and I've got one of my friends from college. I'm like, we should go to this, but
dude,
I also
you should go to that show. It's fucking like they are amazing live. I will say
we're like, go ahead.
Their last album was kind of fucking garbage, though.
So that was absolutely on the question list. I was like, so the album before that was fantastic. Some people shift dynamically in how they perform, right? They change their genre, they do something different, but man, that one just did not connect with me. So that's what gave me pause on like, if the whole show is that album, I don't know that I want to go.
Yeah, there's a cool documentary actually on the Idols. I think it's either on Netflix or Amazon that's worth a watch. I think it's called "We Will Not Go Gently."
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I fucking love about them is they're like this kind of raw, hardcore band, but their messages are all about like love and peace and love your fellow. And like it's the juxtaposition of the message and the delivery method that just makes them kind of unique. And
it's like they stop the severe mosh pit that's happening in front of the stage because somebody fell down. Like, pick them up off the ground. Now you can go back to punching each other. Like, we're here out of love, do whatever you want, but like help the person too. Like, it's the perfect explanation, at least for me, of punk rock specifically. And I've got an 11-year-old and I've got an 8-year-old. But whenever I first started getting back into it, I was sitting in the living room and I was like, hey, my wife was like, we're gonna watch this music video, and it's the music video for Mother, and he's just smashing knickknacks the whole time, like these little China things or whatever. And my youngest daughter comes in and she's like, what is this? And I was, this is a song. She was like, this is what I'm talking about. I'm like, oh, like, I love it, but also I have concerns, because if at 7 years old you're connecting with punk rock music where you just want to smash things, like, what's the teenage years going to look like?
Probably pretty rough for you, my friend.
It'll be one exciting ride. I've said a number of times, this child is either going to lead a boardroom or a prison gang, and either way, she's gonna be leading.
Either way, she's in charge. Either way, she's
right.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about the Idols. Your band is really good. What's the punk band that nobody's talking about that everybody should be?
Well, so one of my favorite bands of all time. And I think is a band who is completely relevant and totally overlooked, is The Damned.
Okay.
And so you think about The Damned. So The Damned is well known as being releasing the first punk album ever in 1976, the first punk single, New Rose. And ironically, when we talked a little bit about Incandescibles, our last album we released, and it was the first punk rock album ever released as an NFT.
So I came across that as well, and
but the limited issue of 176 was in homage to the Damned's original release in 1976. But so I think why the Damned get overlooked is, specifically to your point, as bands evolve, like, they do different shit. Mm-hmm. And so they have this range of styles, from melodic to goth to really kind of more hardcore stuff, to really meaningful lyrics, to just stupid lyrics. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't put them in a box. And I think because of that, they never really developed they only developed a fan base of people who sort of got that. But the people
Right.
that were looking for like the hardcore oi, they're like, oh, well, this new album's goth. Fuck these guys. Or the goths were like, oh, I love this album. And then the next album was fucking hardcore. And they're like, fuck these guys.
Right.
So, and the good news about that is that means that they're still broke. So they still tour. And so
Hey, look, you're not wrong.
They came to SoCal and I was hanging out with them backstage at the House of Blues and shooting the shit with them. But that's a band I've seen in concert. I don't know, probably 15 or 20 times. They always over deliver. It's one of those bands where I don't care what mood I'm in. If I want to like chill the fuck out, or if I want to amp the fuck up, or if I want to go for a run and I need something on my playlist to make me run, there's a damn song that I can use. And I can't say that
connect somebody no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't say that about enough, other bands, pick like no one's ever going to go like, I need to chill out. You got any Megadeth? Or
right.
You got any Slayer? I just need to chill for a little bit.
Yeah, nobody's clamoring for the Slayer acoustic album, unplugged. Unplugged does Slayer. Nobody's after that. Although I will say, and this is sort of in the same vein, like one of the best MTV unplugged albums ever is Korn's unplugged album, without a doubt.
Holy shit! I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, they did one, and there's
an MTV Unplugged.
They did an MTV Unplugged. It's fantastic, and then there's this medley that they do of a oh shit, I can't remember the name of the song now. Anyways, they pull somebody that was one of Jonathan Davis's like favorite musicians whenever he was growing up, and they do this medley of their song and his song mashed together, and it's fantastic. I mean, they're serious musicians, whatever. I mean, like this is a tangent that happens. It's one of the best.
I'm already Googling it to try to find it because it's
you listen to it end to end. It's fantastic. I'm about 10 years younger than you, and so I hit right into the grunge phase. Like, punk was on its way out, but grunge was when everybody was connecting. And so when you talk about unplugged albums, everybody's talking about Nirvana. Like that's the top of the top. But man, this was about 10-ish years after that Nirvana album, and it's fantastic in my opinion.
I gotta check it out. Do you know the band Dinosaur Jr. at all?
Yes, I do. Have
you heard Jay Massis's acoustic solo album?
Mm-mm.
If you're into that shit, you might want to check this out. It's called Martin and Me because he plays a Martin guitar. Jay Mascis, Martin and Me. So it's all Dinosaur Jr. songs, but sung in like a coffee shop. Like, and literally, I think it was in a coffee shop they recorded it. It's one of my probably top 20 albums of all time. I think it's just fucking spectacular.
Well, that's on the list now. So I've got The Damned, and now I've got Jay Mascis' acoustic album. See, this is perfect. This is exactly what
we came on to talk about bourbon, and we ended up talking about like acoustic punk rock albums from the 90s.
You never know. Like, well, I mean, we were talking about Australian single malt on Monday night, and we ended up talking about mental health for 30 minutes. So you just don't know what's going to happen.
But I feel like you're surprisingly well-rounded from a music perspective, and I don't mean this to sound pejorative, but you live in fucking Kentucky. I would have imagined that you're kind of
So I had the advantage
or the Georgia line or whatever the fuck country shit is going on down there.
I had the advantage of growing up in a radio station. My dad, whenever he was in college, he was, he's the guy that grew up like the Beatles fan, and then he moved into Pink Floyd, and he did all of these things. And so we always had a wide array of music available to us whenever I was a kid. And then he worked in a radio station selling radio advertising whenever I was real young. And so I would go and sit in with a DJ while he was still running tapes. Like they were running tapes at that point.
Shit.
Not like the tapes, but they were more like an 8-track type thing that radio stations would use. And so I would go in and just sit, and I learned a lot of things there, but I learned an appreciation of like all music types. If it was a country music song that was made after 1993, I'm probably not invested, but anything before that, I'll give it a listen because there was something that existed there. But aside from that, there's not a genre that I won't listen to, like that I won't appreciate, because it's music, man. Music is music.
Music is music.
It's formative. It's
It's like wine in a sense. It's like this community experience that, like, I guarantee you, there's songs that that like the first time you heard them, you're like, oh, what the fuck is it? I remember the first time I heard NWA growing up, so I grew up in Southern California, right? And so we used to drive up to the LBC to get like mixtapes, and we had gotten the Eazy-E mixtape. And Straight Outta Compton came out, and we'd heard about it. We drove up to the hood and we got the tapes, and we were listening to it on the way back in the car. It was me and my buddy Kenyatta. And I was driving my shitty Mazda 626, and we got the NWA Straight Outta Compton in the car. And we're driving, and I pulled over into the emergency lane on the freeway, and we just looked at each other and went, "Are you fucking kidding me? Did they just say that? Holy shit!" And so it is one of those things where it has the music, I think, has the power to connect into this primal brain. Like back in the day, what were we doing for 50,000 years? We made fires, we sat outside, we beat on shit, and we sang, and we fucked, and we drank like homebrew.
It's a primal connection that exists. And so this is maybe the easiest way to kind of tie up in a moderately neat bow my musical taste. The first CD that I ever purchased was the soundtrack to Natural Born Killers. Have you seen the movie Natural Born Killers?
Of course, with Woody Harrelson. It's fucking awesome.
Right. So in that album, I had to pull up the musicians list. Is a Leonard Cohen song. There's Patti Smith. There's Bob Dylan. There's Nine Inch Nails. There's Cowboy Junkies. There's Patsy Cline. There's Dr. Dre. There's the Dog Pound. Like, and there's more. Like, there's more that's in here. But that was the first like super transformative album that I ever bought because it had everything.
Yeah.
It was like there's Patsy Cline and Nine Inch Nails on the same album.
It's just missing Tom Waits, and you'd have pretty much every fucking genre known to man. Like,
yeah, it's just like Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan's on here, and it's a song that Bob Dylan doesn't really do anywhere else. It's anyways. That's where my musical tastes sort of lie.
That's a great analogy. Like my musical taste is the Natural Born Killers soundtrack.
Yeah, and it's largely stayed that way because there's a good wine, a good whiskey, a good live show. All of those things can be pivotal in your life. Period. Like you can just. It's an experience.
I guarantee you've got your top 5 concerts. You know exactly what they are. You don't have a top concert if you've been to enough concerts.
No, there's no. I don't think that there can be, and that's that's the same thing as like you can't have a top wine. You may have a top wine experience. You may have an experience. You can say, all the way through from end to end, this one experience was it. But you can't have a top wine. You can't have a top whiskey. Anytime I say, like, what's your favorite whiskey? Okay, what's the price point? What's the mood? What's the thing I'm trying to do? Like, there's too many things to kind of tie in there. But I can point to like the single time that I had probably the best whiskey experience of my life. And it just was a connection of the people that I was around, the thing that I was drinking, the experience that was curated for us, like the whole thing. Like it was just, it's something. And thinking about how musicians put together set lists, it's like, and I don't think modern musicians do this anymore, but crafting the order of play on an album was important to a band at a point in time, right? They were trying to create an experience from beginning to end, especially in the era of tapes before you could skip ahead easily, right? Just a regular old tape, you just listen to it end to end. And anytime I listen to new music, I try to listen to it from beginning to end to see, is this person trying to take me on an acoustic journey of some type, Well,
so to that end, I will tell you, when we decided we were going to release a punk rock album as an NFT, the idea that I had is most of the other, I think we were actually the first people to do this, but I don't know it for 100%. Most of the other albums that came out that were NFTs, you would get like artwork and a download code that would let you download some shit from like Spotify or whatever. We said, no, we're going to take the approach that we want it to be more like if Pearl Jam is coming out with a new album, they also release 100 editions on vinyl that you can buy that are signed by the band, and that's its own special thing. And so the way that we built the NFT, we actually had to downgrade the quality a little bit because you need it to be under 100 megabytes really to work well on the blockchain.
Right.
But it's a continuous play. It's one continuous file with spaces between the songs, and you click on it and it just plays like an album.
It's a vinyl record album, even though you could pick the needle up and move it, but you'd never get it exactly right. It's a tape. It's a thing that most modern generations don't get anymore because they're into singles. They're into pick up a song and put together a Spotify playlist.
It's the next arrow, and
absolutely. Well, I mean, like that's the thing. Like Spotify's the thing, and so you create a playlist that is a single song from like 400 different bands, right? Mm-hmm. So you never get an idea of the identity of that particular musician. The musician doesn't necessarily have to craft one, and maybe that's what they prefer. But I don't know. I mean, that's the place where maybe us old folks are connecting with music in a different way.
So the point of all this is we had band arguments for months about
what was going to go next.
Going to be, and then we finally settled on it, and not everyone was happy with it.
But is it what it needed to be? And that's what it boils down to.
From my perspective, yes. Like, I think the way that
so you won the argument. Is that what you're saying? Like, you won the argument on how it should
I won the argument. Yeah. And so the way we started is we took the song that was the most different stylistically, and we made it first. So you listen to that and you're like, okay, cool. I know what this band's all about. And then the next song was the most stylistically opposite to the first song. We made that second, with the idea that you're like, okay, I know what this band's about. And then you go to the second song, you're like, wait, what the fuck? Oh shit! Now where are we going? And then we built it up from there. And then we ended with the song that I thought was sort of probably my favorite lyrically song on the album, but also the most simplistic from a musical perspective. So like there was a lot of thought put into this, and with our previous album, there wasn't. It was just like, here's the fucking songs, whatever.
Right. And I think if you're trying to create kind of a new experience, you're looking at an NFT of a punk album. I think that's the way you have to do it, right? Like you put the first song first, and then the second song sounds nothing like the first song, because the entire idea is that you shouldn't necessarily approach it with a preconceived notion of what it's going to be.
That's right.
That's sort of what punk at least has been in my mindset for a long time, is that it can sound about 10 different ways, and that's okay. That's what the point of it is.
Oh yeah. I mean, you think about like back in the day, here are some bands that were called punk: Blondie, the Talking Heads, the Dead Kennedys, Devo. Like they were all very, very different. And the whole point was you're basically saying, I'm doing something different, and that's punk. But it doesn't have to be the same.
The Talking Heads is the one that got me back into punk a couple of years ago. At the same time that the Idols hit, there was a movie that came out that put in the
American Utopia.
So it's got Psycho Killers in it, by the Talking Heads, and I hadn't heard that song in probably 20 or 25 years. Like I know I'd heard it before, but I just hadn't heard it, and it connected at a different level, which was not necessarily a punk song from them. But then when you start kind of digging in, then like you dig in like, oh, okay, well, here's where their origins of the band were. Let's get the albums. Let's start listening to stuff. And then I'm like, oh, well, what's happening in punk now? And so now it's the Idols are here. And I'm like, oh, well, there's a new band that exists, because up until then, punk was defined by, Green Day or by Blink-182, which can be fun.
Or Sum 41, or that whole sort of 90s kind
No, I wasn't going to mention Sum 41 or Good Charlotte. I was going to leave them out of the conversation altogether.
Have you seen American Utopia?
I have not.
Okay, so
you're giving me a list of things here. Hold on.
You need to put that on the top of the fucking list, and you need to watch that tonight. You need to bang up Amazon Prime, and you need to get some bourbon and sit there and watch American Utopia. And you can thank me fucking later.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
It's right here. It's on the absolute list. But yeah, that was the Talking Heads was 100% on this list of people to talk about, because that is like it's one of the bands that are currently classified in that punk realm, but I don't ever remember
This
that
book
being
is
a
on
thing.
my desk right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally within arm's reach of me right now.
I don't have any music books within arm reach, but they're back here. I got
The only reason I do is because I was reading it on the plane when I was traveling last week, and when I got home, I took it out of my computer bag and I set it on my desk. So it's not like I have a stack of music books here. But I do happen to have that one, and it is David Byrne. So
right.
I mean, he's a fucking cool cat. He's an interesting guy. I don't know that I would want to have a glass of wine with him. I think
you can have a glass of wine with anybody once, right? Like you can at least check that box off and say, well, I've done it. I may not do that again, but I did it.
That is true. I am sure if David Byrne DM'd me and said, Mike, swing by my place next time you're in New York. I want to talk to you about some wine. I would be like, are you fucking kidding? I'm 100%.
You have to, like, you can't say no to that. You gotta answer the call, but it may not be all the things you wanted it to be.
What's interesting to me is going back to the whole wine experience thing. And I truly believe that wine is something that is meant to be shared. Like you rarely hear people talking about like, oh, I had this great bottle of wine, so I went home and I drank it all by myself, right? it's always like this community sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say is having had these wine experiences with people all around the world in every continent, including Antarctica, to be honest, what I've found is that the ones that you thought were going to be awesome were not necessarily awesome. The ones that you like just stumbled into ended up being spectacular. Like I remember we went to this one, and I won't say the guy's name, but we went to this one celebrated cult winemaker in Australia, and I had been emailing him for months. I'm coming down there. We're going to go there, and so we show up. He shows up 30 minutes late. He shows up. He goes, he looks like he slept in a gutter. And he goes, I was up all night drinking. I'm super hungover, but I committed to do this to you. So I'm sorry I'm a little bit late, but come on in. And he even said, I apologize for looking like I slept in a gutter. He went in, we went into his basement, and he laid out plastic folding lawn chairs, and he laid down on one, and he threw a giant hunk of prosciutto on the table and opened up 10 bottles of wine and said, guys, just enjoy yourself. Ask me questions if you need me. And he laid down on the thing. We sat in this basement on plastic lawn chairs, slicing chunks of pig off of a fucking haunch of pig and drinking wine and it was like this epic, like everyone that was there still talks about that shit. Like,
right.
Can you believe that? That was fucking awesome. Matter of fact, this was like at least 6 or 7 years ago. And on what's today, Friday? So on Tuesday, I was at my friend's house, and he still had a bottle of wine that we had bought from that guy, and we opened it, and we took a photo of it, and we texted it to everybody that was there that night, going like, "Hey, like that's how." Like,
remember this?
Remember this? And then of course the text changed like, "Oh shit, remember that?" Like we were.
Yep.
It was fucking awesome.
Yeah, and those are the experience. That's like I bought the 4 bottles with the intent. My wife has a coworker that she likes to drink wine as well. Her husband likes to drink wine. I'm like, we'll get together. He's a big Scotch guy. I've got some Scotch samples. I've got some wine. We'll get together. We'll drink these things together and see what it's about. Like learn about a new varietal of wine that none of us have ever had. The Nebbiolo, whatever it was. You said it earlier.
Yeah,
Nebbiolo. There you go. That one. We picked this up. Like none of us have ever tried this before. We'll try it together, and we'll either hate it together or love it together. But even when you try something that is terrible, that can still be a fun experience. Like I've drank some truly awful things. I was at an event with some friends, and there was a distiller that was making their own smoky peated whiskey here in the United States using their own ingredients, and it was not good, but the environment of us all sort of tasting it at the same time, it's very much oh my God, this is terrible. You try this, right? And then we're all passing it around. And, a few minutes later, a man pops up that sometimes he ends up in the chat here, not. But he had brought some snack. He lives in Hawaii. He brought some snack cakes. He's like, oh, we'll pair some stuff. He brought some durian fruit snack cakes.
Oh shit!
Yeah, which sort of smells and tastes like hot garbage. Like
yeah,
it was just
durian tastes and smells like eating a fart.
Exactly. But there's a communal experience. Everybody was together. It doesn't have to taste great for it to be fun. It just makes it better when it does. Like when it tastes good and everybody's having a good time, things go well.
But I think like for me, I get less hung up on the outcome. Like I want the experience, and I want the experience to be meaningful. And if it is, fucking great.
See, that could be the story of my college career right there. I'm more interested in the experience than I am the outcome. You know, lots of people go to college for 10 years. They're usually called doctors, but sometimes they just get their bachelor degree or whatever. You know, but
you could drag a 4-year degree out to 10 years if you try hard enough.
I did. That wasn't a joke. Like that's the punchline is that was the truth. You know, it's the type of thing where I went back to get my MBA explicitly to prove like I can do an education on a normal time frame with good grades. Like it didn't necessarily benefit me greatly in my career path, but I was like, look, kids, he didn't have like an inordinately good time in college, but I had a lot of fun experiences, met a lot of interesting people, traveled to some places, did some fun things. You know, I just stretched it out and changed my major like 47 times, you know, like anybody might do. But I could also go to school. Like I can do this. So you know, let's go get an MBA to prove that. Spend a bunch of damn money just to prove a point. But you know, that's what money's for, right?
Hey, you're talking to a guy who teaches in a business school. Like I understand the MBA process.
Yeah, and it you know, a college degree is a college degree, an MBA is an MBA. It's a thing to be proud of, but I'll take the experiences that I had over the course of my education as an even marking of the education.
I think I respect experiences more than I expect initials. I would much rather hang out and drink wine with the guy who has cooler stories to tell than the dude that just tells me about. So then I followed the recipe exactly. And then I graduated and my SATs were great. And I got into a good school and I joined all the right clubs and I did that. Like, all right, cool.
Well, you're in luck because I'm not that guy.
Yeah, I'm not that guy. Right. I tell you what, why don't you go back to your country club and I'm going to go play some punk rock drums with my friends and then maybe get in a fight and then drink some wine and, you know.
Yeah, the country club makes me feel uncomfortable. It just does. I was at an event last week for work, staying at a very much country club type place. Beautiful grounds. You know, it had a nice stone wall all around the facility, a hotel, event type location that it was pretty exclusive. And I walked in, I was like, these are not my people. Like I can be here. I'm not gonna, you know, I didn't show up with no shoes and, you know, missing teeth, you know, not a inbred redneck or anything, but like this is not it for me. It's a beautiful place. I appreciate being here, but
so I lived in, I'm 52. I just turned 52. Mm-hmm. I lived in California, Southern California, my entire life. Until about 4 weeks ago when I moved to the East Coast. And so where I lived prior to moving was in a very exclusive enclave in Orange County. And you would know it because that is where the Real Housewives of Orange County started. And that is launched the whole thing. And of course, there was a country club. And so I like playing golf. But I kind of don't give a shit about all the rest of the stuff. So I'm like, but it's a 2-minute drive from my house. So I joined the country club. And so they have this rule that you have to wear a collared shirt when you play golf. And it has to be tucked in. And I have two speeds. I have tailored suits or I have punk rock t-shirts. I don't have anything in between. I don't have fucking golf shirts. But they're like, you have to have this if you're going to play here. So I go, okay, fine. So I went on Etsy. And I commissioned a whole bunch of different collared shirts, but I have one with a Dead Kennedys logo. I have one with a giant marquee sign. So I'm showing up, and I'm literally, and the guy's like,
"It's the rule," and I followed it.
I followed the rule. Yeah, that's a Dead Kennedy sign. What are you gonna do about that? So like,
I appreciate that. That like you find the rule and you find the way to exploit it, because you don't necessarily agree with it, but you still follow. You still follow it, but you're not following the intent of the rule.
I am absolutely not following the intent of the rule. And actually, if there was a way to, to not follow it, I would absolutely not follow it. But I'm like, all right, cool. If this is the cost of playing golf,
That can almost be more fun, like the following the rule but not
oh
meeting
no,
the intent.
it's fucking
That's
awesome.
it's
It's spectacular. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same way that you start a blog just because you read somebody's review on a particular wine that you completely disagreed with. Like, you
Like,
you launch a book on it, like, fuck you.
all right,
I can do this.
But I think there's this other piece that, like, in today's society, and you see this, I'm sure, there's like, oh, somebody, posts something that you don't agree with, so you just start flaming them, and you blow them up online, like, anonymously. That's bullshit. Like, I didn't do that. I was like, I disagree with this. So what I'm going to do is start a worldwide phenomenon over here that is has a counter argument. I won't, and I don't ever like mention who it was that wrote this book and what book it was.
Right.
Specifically because I'm like, I'm not trying to blow that person up. That was their opinion.
Right.
I have a different opinion. And so
they're allowed to have their opinion. They're allowed to be wrong. It's okay. They can be wrong with their opinion. It's fine.
Yeah, they can be wrong. And rather than telling them they're wrong, I'm just going to go out and promote a counter opinion.
You're going to prove them to be wrong. You're not going to tell them. You're just going to prove that they are wrong, just by being better at what they were doing than they were to begin with.
That's the hope.
All right, I got to go back to my notes here and see what else I have left on the calendar here. Hot rods, cars. You're hot rods and car. You're into this. So are we talking about like classic hot rods, or are we talking about like tuner cars or imports? Like, what are we talking about here?
So I'm a motorhead.
Mm-hmm.
I have many vehicles that span a lot of genres. The last hot rod that I built was a 1931 Ford Roadster.
Okay.
But what I did was I built a bare metal car that was Art Deco.
Mm-hmm.
And so pretty much every piece on the car is custom fabricated with a lot of brass and a lot of wood. So it's very Art Deco, but at the same time, it's very stripped down, raw. It's like steampunk meets Art Deco. And and actually, this is another one of those things where brilliant idea, didn't think through all the practical fucking considerations, but turns out bare metal cars, if they get the slightest bit of moisture, they start to rust. You got to fucking like scrub the rust off constantly.
And was this on the West Coast? Were you still on the West Coast when you did this car?
Yeah. I mean,
so it's not just moisture, but it's like salty air too.
Yeah. I mean, for me, where I lived was about probably 7 miles inland from the beach. So and I was in a little valley.
Gotcha.
So we really wouldn't get the salt air, but we definitely would get like dew and stuff. So you just got to stay on top of it. And over time, the metal develops a patina, but you still got to stay on top of it. What's funny is, so I mentioned I just moved. So I shipped all my vehicles out here in trailers. And when the trailer showed up with the hot rod, I took it out of the trailer and I moved it into the garage. And that distance was about, I don't know, 1,000 feet maybe. But when I took it out, it was misting. And I'm like, oh shit, it's fucking misting. And so I like pulled the shirt I was wearing off and I like tried to rinse off the car or dry it off as best I could. And then I went back like 2 days later and you could see like these big swirls of rust forming where you could see where I missed it. So that car's pretty awesome. I conceived it with this designer named Bugs, and then we built it by Hollywood Hot Rods, who's built some pretty, award-winning cars, and it's fucking dope. I have like really cool pictures of like car shows where there's 12 cars and my car's at one end and there's 40 people around my car and nobody at the other 11. So I have that. And then back to your tuner question, like my son and I are restoring a 1971 240Z right now.
Mhm.
And so, I've got that, and then I've got some newer cars that like I've got a 911 that is pretty sporty. I got a Continental GT that's pretty sporty. So it sort of runs the gamut. Same with motorcycles. I have everything from a 1964 Cafe Racer that we're restoring to like a Aprilia 200. So
yeah, the Cafe Racer, that's my like retirement purchase. I rode motorcycles a very little bit before I got married, and then when we had kids, my wife was like, "No motorcycle until the second kid gets into college, right? Like, let's make sure that you're still here to help pay for them." So it's the thing, it's we sort of do life backwards. I was talking about this with one of my coworkers where, like we spend the middle part of our life like raising children, and then when we get the free time to like go be adults is maybe when we're not necessarily in the best health. Like I'm 65 years old, riding a Cafe Racer is probably not a good choice. It's not like a good look for me.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think, God willing, we're all 65 going, you know what? Fuck yeah. It's Cafe Racer time.
No. I'm gonna do it, but like spending, a couple of hours hunched over might not be the most.
Your back's gonna hurt a little bit more.
Exactly, right. But like 20-year-old me is like, let's ride to Florida on this thing, That's just sort of how we do life.
I mean, I was kind of fortunate. I had my kids very early.
Mm-hmm.
So, my kids have been aged out for shit. My youngest kid will be 23. So they aged out a long time ago. But to your point, like, what sucked? My 20s.
Right.
So like all my friends are like, we're all going to Vegas this weekend. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm changing diapers on a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. What are you guys, I go have fun. But now it seems like a genius move. So sort of like, when do you want your pain, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other side of it is that I didn't have the money at 20 to do the fun things that I'm going to want to do whenever I'm 60. And so maybe I need, maybe that's the way it needs to be so I can build up the resources. But so what do you do for a living? Like these are all different ventures. Like you've got your hands in a rum company, you write books, you are working on a wine company. You have some pretty fun hobbies, but like, what do you do? Like, how do you fund your adventure? If you're allowed to talk about that.
No, totally. So I work for a Big Four consulting firm. Mm-hmm. So I'm a partner in a Big Four consulting firm. I've been there 27 years. And I convinced them a couple of years ago that we should have a wine consulting arm and that I should run it. And for some reason, they thought that was a good idea. So I basically figured out a way to get paid big corporate money to go hang out at wineries, which is literally, sometimes I sit back and I go, fuck, I won the corporate lottery. How did they agree to this? But
well, I mean, I would suspect, if you're working for a Big Four consulting firm, you can convince them maybe to give you the job, but you don't convince them to keep the job if you're not successful, right? So you can be coy about, I locked it. Like, I feel like you're good at what you do.
No, I am good at what I do. And I think the thing about it is over my career with the firm, I think my reputation has been find a niche and then build capabilities for us to service that niche that are creative. And let's go do that. And so, this is, I think, the 7th one of these that I've done since I've been at the firm. And we are now the largest we are the largest provider of consulting services to the wine industry in the world. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can't just, and you're right. I wasn't trying to be coy. I was trying to maybe be a little bit humble, but yeah, there's, if you can prove the business model, if the business model works and it makes sense, fuck yeah, we're going to do it. And I was able to prove that and demonstrate it, and it works. So, but the offshoot of that is that, yes, my job is go hang out at wineries around the world, which is a fucking cool job.
Absolutely.
That's my fucking hobby, right? Like, get paid to do it for work. Fuck, I'm all in. But yeah, like it has to make sense. And the thing about the wine industry is, it's a niche that is relatively, I'm probably like, I don't even know if I should be saying this on a fucking podcast, but it's been relatively ignored by the larger firms because it's been perceived as small or private companies rather than public companies or whatever. And so it was just like us showing up and going like, yeah, you guys are important too. Let us help you. And we know what the fuck we're talking about. And so, pretty easy sell.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I could be wrong, but it feels like a lot of people have avoided spirits in general, whether it's wine or whiskey at that point. But we're seeing more companies push in there, like Pritzker Financial just purchased a distillery, right? So the Pritzker family, who is everything that they are, they're coming in. Like you're seeing these other people that are not the Sazeracs and the other Diageos and the spirits conglomerates. There are people who have nothing to do with spirits now starting to show up. They're doing that in wine, they're doing that in whiskey, wherever else there's there's markets there.
Fucking who's the young Kardashian girl and her 818 tequila or whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah. Well,
Kylie Jenner, there's that shit.
Yeah, there's a number of, even within the whiskey industry, a number of celebrity brands, but most whiskey folks turn their nose up at celebrity brands because usually they'll go out and buy inexpensive whiskey from somewhere else, slap a label on it, move forward. There's very few that are legitimately invested in the long-term success of a company. Like Terry Bradshaw has his own whiskey now. But he actually wants it to be good and it's not expensive. He's not cashing in on his name. And I mean, I don't know how much you can cash in on the Terry Bradshaw name at this point. You get some football fans, but it's not a Kardashian at this point. But
you think George, about like we see that in the wine space too. Mm-hmm. So like Brad and Angelina buy a rosé place in France. Okay, great. They put their name on it. But then you get Maynard from Tool, who starts a winery in this weird part of Arizona and then goes out there and literally is passionate like me. He's trying to figure out what the fuck's going to work in Arizona. Mm-hmm. He's planting 35 different varietals in a 1 acre vineyard to try to hone in on what it is. And he's the guy that's in there and digging it. Like I want to drink that guy's wine way more than I want to drink Lady Gaga's Dom Perignon collaboration.
Right. I guess maybe the only caveat to the whole thing for me is I absolutely want to drink Lagavulin with Nick Offerman, right? So he's got his own bottle now.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, he's had 2 rounds of doing the Nick Offerman Lagavulin bottle.
No shit, I didn't know about that. Lagavulin's my favorite Scotch.
Yeah, so he's got his own. I guess it's not his own. I mean, it's still Lagavulin, but it's like the Nick Offerman edition. There's 2 of those that exist. Yeah, I wanted, and it was explicitly out of him just being a huge fan of Lagavulin. Like he didn't want to start up his own label or do anything. Like I'm just a huge fan, and they're like, "Cool, we'll throw your name on a label. We can do a blend. We'll do whatever." And that's one I'll take. Like he doesn't have a bunch of investment in it, but I'll take that.
Holy shit, dude! We need to fucking organize a podcast with me, you, and Offerman drinking Offerman's Lagavulin.
I've sent the emails to his team. I'm working on it, man. And if I get it, I will reach out and be like, "Hey."
Well, I'll tell you what. Like I don't have any connection with Offerman, but I have a fairly broad network. Mm-hmm. I'll throw some emails out into the ether and see if we can fucking tee that, because I think that would be awesome. That's my favorite fucking Scotch, and Offerman is fucking hysterical.
Yeah, he's got his own little podcast thing that he's doing right now, and like just. The character, because he gets somewhat popular from Ron Swanson, but that's not who he like. It is who he is, but it's also not who he is, right? Like his identity is so different than that. I've read a couple of his books. He's just an interesting character all around.
Yeah,
like huge theater background. Just So he's on the list of people that he's got a celebrity brand, but it's not like some of these other folks. It's not like the Kylie Jenners or what's the dude that played Van Wilder? What's his name? Ryan Reynolds. He did his own gin, and George, and George Clooney did. Was it a gin or tequila or vodka or something?
Clooney did tequila. So actually, Clooney's story I think is more along the lines of like we were passionate, we were doing this, and we found we had something cool. I think like the Conor McGregor whiskey is
proper 12.
That's the exact opposite of. Yep. That's the Kylie Jenner bullshit. I'm slapping my name on something, and fuck, it worked, right? Like he sold.
That's what, yeah, I was gonna say. I can more appreciate his because I don't feel like he went in with the intent to make something great. He went in with the intent to be a businessman and make money.
and
And I
it
don't,
worked.
and it worked amazingly. And it's mediocre at best, right?
At
It's not,
best.
but it's not priced crazy either. Because that's the other part you get into with celebrity brands. Sometimes they're like, throw their name on it, charge $200 for the bottle for something
Yeah.
that should be $40 or whatever, and he didn't go that route. It was still a relatively inexpensive thing. And, people who aren't whiskey fans are going to go out and buy it because they're a Conor McGregor fan. But at the end of the day, they got something you could drink. It's not like, straight up swill. It's just not great.
Not good. Yeah.
No, it's Sutter Home,
Yeah. I mean, if you were going to mix something with Coke and you wanted to pay, what's the retail on that? Like $18 maybe?
It depends. It's somewhere between 18 and $25 is
Yeah,
what,
it probably
if
depends
I
on-
remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, like we took the exact opposite approach with our rum company, which was like, let's make something bitchin'. And, in retrospect, we ended up with the world's highest rated rum, but, no one's throwing $800 million at us to take our hand.
Not yet.
So
Not yet. So that's because that's what a lot of investors are trying to figure out. What is the next bourbon, right? Because we're in a bourbon boom in the United States, right? We went from, virtually trying to give away whiskey in the late 90s. Like you just couldn't get people to buy it, to bottles that should be $30 are going on black market sites for $500 right now. Like this is happening all the time. That's going to die off eventually. What's the next spirit category? And some folks are going the route of, they think that it's going to be cognac or Armagnac. And some people think it's going to be tequila, but I'm leaning probably on rum. Rum becomes the next thing because it's more deeply seated in American culture than any other spirit realistically. Like, if you go back to, the Revolutionary War, like the rations that were given, rum. We had a lot of rum because we didn't have.
Rum is the highest consumed alcohol spirit by volume in the world.
Mm-hmm. And it's not surprising because it's everywhere, but that's where some people think it's going that route. To the end of some whiskey families are getting into rum, like they're starting up rum brands with the intent of trying to capture that market. And so you just may be ahead. You may be just like 10 years ahead of everybody else.
Hopefully the world. What's funny is like we have this awesome rum, right? It's high, 95 points, highest rated silver rum in history. Double gold medals everywhere, and dominant in Southern California. But I just don't have the time to like try to go take it and scale it
everywhere else.
A level. And my partner and I, so I have a partner in it, and he's in the same boat. He's a corporate guy too, and we're like, we have this amazing product, but like neither one of us have the time to go make this work. So it just kind of chugs along and is well loved in Southern California, but like
it just doesn't. There's not the time to invest in it to take it to the next level. It can exist, perpetually in its state. It sounds like it can exist perpetually in its state.
It can exist forever. And like you go to any bar in Costa Mesa or Newport Beach, and you order rum and Coke, it's a SoCal rum and Coke. That's what's up.
That was. I think you may have just marked off the last thing that I had on here. I hadn't gotten back to the SoCal rum because you've got this quote on the website that just want to do epic shit with epic people, and I don't have to ask a question around that because you've already covered that at length. It's like, well, I don't need to ask the question. But so, how long is the rum? Like, what got you to rum? Like, how did you get to rum? Just identifying market or?
No, not at all. Actually, one of my best friends is like a huge passionate rum guy, and my son is a huge passionate rum guy, and I could give a fuck about rum. And one day, actually, ironically, this was in Bhutan. We were sitting on this patio in Bhutan, my friend, and we just run the Bhutan Marathon. It was the same day, actually. It was that evening. And we were sitting on the balcony or this patio after the marathon, having some drinks and looking out over the Punaka Valley and just enjoying it. And my buddy Glenn goes, out of nowhere, we should start a distillery. And I go, what? Making what? And he goes, making rum. And I go, fuck that. Like, I don't want to make rum. And he goes, no. Like, listen, like we should just do it. It'd be cool.
Mhm.
And I go, all right, like talk.
What's the case? How do we get there?
And so he was like, hey, I drink Captain Morgan, but I think I could do it better. And I go, well, that's fine, Glenn, but how many spiced rums can you name? And he's like, Captain Morgan, Sailor Jerry, Myers, whatever. And I go, okay, cool. How many silver rums can you name? And he's like, Bacardi. And I go, other than Bacardi. And he goes, none. And I go, why don't we just try to make a better version of Bacardi?
Right.
And rather than investing a bunch of capital in a distillery, why don't we focus on making a recipe that we can have somebody else make for us? And he's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And so we dicked around with this recipe for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And then we finally found something that we thought that we liked, like this works. And so we went to a production facility and we said, here's our recipe. Can you make this for us? They said, sure. They made it for us. And we tried it. We're like, this is awesome. And so we submitted it to the San Francisco Spirits Competition, which you probably know, the biggest one in the world. And we just wanted to be like acknowledged. And they came back and like gold medal. We're like, holy shit. So then we took it to the SIP Awards, which we're like, all right, we got the critics side. Let's get the consumer's perspective. And the consumers were like double gold. And so then we were like, let's submit it to the Ratings Institute and get a rating on it. They're like 95 points, highest silver rum ever. We're like, oh shit, we did it.
that is unexpected success. Like you want it to be successful, but maybe that wasn't exactly how high you thought you were going to go.
We did not think we were going to get that. Like we just wanted to make something that was reasonable, and then we ended up making something that was awesome. And so they're like, we should sell this. And so we started taking it out to the local marketplace, and everyone's like, this is great, we love this. And so we did that, and kind of grew it to, actually, there's a really interesting article called the rum that Paris Hilton pours at her house parties. Somehow we got into the Hollywood scene, and all of the like we were doing like all the movie premieres, all the we were in a couple episodes of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. At their parties, like it became kind of a little bit of this kind of status thing, which I think really helped the success of the brand in Southern California. But like I said, unfortunately, we haven't had the time to really try to scale it nationally, which is what you would need to do if you were trying to do an equity event or some type of an exit strategy. And you know what? And fuck it, like I don't really care. I own the fucking highest rated silver rum company in the world. Whether,
and you don't have to do anything for it to stay alive. That's
I don't have to do anything for it to stay alive. It's fine. Could I make $100 million off of it if I wanted to go push it? Yeah, probably.
Right.
Or 500 million, whatever the number is. But like for me, it's about doing epic shit with cool people. It's about finding happiness. It's not about having money. If I killed myself for the next 5 years and sold it for 800 million, would I be any happier? I don't know that I would be. Like I can go roll down to the local bar in Newport Beach and be like, fucking SoCal guys here. What's up, dude?
Yeah. You have a sense of pride and ownership. It's going back to this idea from Bhutan of gross national happiness, right? Like you're living a life towards gross national happiness. And that's great.
I mean, I made it. So I went through this really gnarly divorce, and I was married for 11 years. And then I went into a divorce proceeding that lasted 13 years. So for any of your listeners who's thinking about getting married, don't do it in the state of California. And so, through that process, like I went through some pretty radical mind shifts where I sort of got to this point that was like, dude, stuff doesn't matter. Like if you can get stuff and you want stuff, like get it, like go build a weird 1931 hot rod, but don't do it because you think it's going to be worth a ton of money. No one's going to want to buy that thing. You're going to spend a ton of money on it. But if you want to do it, like if it brings you happiness, and so stop worrying about shit and stuff and things and start worrying about like what brings me happiness and go do that. And so, you know what? If the SoCal Rum Company sold for $1 billion tomorrow, or if it just chugged along sustaining life, I would be equally happy with either one of those outcomes. It's and to reach that state of mind. I mean, it took getting the shit kicked out of me by the California family court system to realize that. But overall, I've become a much, I don't know, more grounded. It's just a happier person. Like I feel like I'm more focused on the stuff that matters to me. And that's cool. That's a cool place to live.
I think that's a thing we can all. I don't know that there's a better exit point in a conversation than that one. What I want. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
No, I feel like I just looked up at the little live feed. We've been on this thing for over 2 hours, and I feel like
right, yeah.
20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm nearing in on bedtime for children here downstairs in a few minutes, but I could keep going. Like I think maybe in the same place where it's just a fun conversation. So it doesn't have to be the only one. We're gonna get Nick Offerman on. We're gonna drink some whiskey. We're gonna talk to Nick Offerman. We're gonna drink his whiskey specifically. It's gonna happen. It may take the rest of the year, but we'll try to connect that up because I can just be like, hey, you want to join this podcast episode? I've got a guy who owns the most highest rated silver rum in the market, period. And he's an author and he does adventure races and he started wine. Like, he's far more interesting. You should come talk. We'll
let's go hang out. Like we're interesting dudes. Let's go do some interesting shit. Yeah,
absolutely. I appreciate you for joining me tonight. Like I said, we'll absolutely have to do this again. I'm anxiously awaiting the first release of the wine from Bhutan. I have a list of homework now. I've got to watch American Utopia. I'm going to go pull some music from The Damned, and then I've got to go pull this Martin and Me album. Like, I've got homework. It's the episodes I love is whenever I have a term that I've got to go back to look at, which is the gross national happiness model. Like, when I learn things, this is perfect. This is exactly what I'm after. So I appreciate you for joining me tonight, giving me 2 hours of your time. I know it's incredibly valuable. If you got anything else you want to say before I boot you off for a minute, hit my closing.
No, I would say if people want to check it out, you can go to drinkingandknowingthings.com. You can sign up, start getting the newsletters. If you want to check out SoCal Rum, you can go to SoCalRum.com. If you want to see what's going on with Bhutan Wine, BhutanWine.com. I'm a very savvy marketer with my
keep it straightforward. And I'll caution people to. Sometimes you hear the word newsletter, right? And you think of a lot of things. What you put out from Drinking and Knowing Things doesn't feel like a newsletter, right? Like, I've signed up for a lot of marketing newsletters. This is not one of those. This is a different type of connection. So I'd encourage anyone, absolutely sign up for it. Take the advice, buy a few bottles. I'll be able to tell you in a week or two whether I've connected with any of these 4 bottles that I've picked up. They won't be the only ones. We'll get some more. We'll work our way through probably at least a dozen of the wines that are in the book to begin with. So appreciate it. Like I said, this is super fun. Usually I try to target 30 or 45 minutes worth of content, and the conversation runs as long as it does. The ones that run beyond an hour and a half, that's just a sign that things are going well, because people don't stick around for 2 hours to talk about nothing. So
no, it's been great, man. I really appreciate you having me. And I tell you what, if I get down to Kentucky, I'm going to come over and we'll just have some bourbon and fuck off.
I've got a few things for you. I'll bring out whatever you want. That's what I always tell anybody. Like, if somebody comes over to the house and they want to drink some whiskey, like, whatever there is, there's no things are off limits, because it's meant to be drank together. That's what its purpose is.
Well, I appreciate you letting me just run my mouth for a couple hours. So.
Hey, no, that's what we're here for. So thank you so much for being here.
Right on.
Okay. All right, so that was super fun, folks. Thanks for tuning in for this offering from the Embellish Podcast. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform that you have to be consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media on Twitter or Instagram using EmbellishPod. Give me a follow and you can see what's going on there. I can also be found at www.embellishpod.com. All of my links, account, contact details, so forth and so on. I'll be back again next week with another new offering for you. So until then, cheers and thanks for hanging out, listening to what we have to say. It was these are the episodes that I am absolutely here for. So I appreciate everybody for hanging out.